The fluorescent lights hummed in Hall C of the Atlanta Convention Center on May 17, 2008, and Dr. Robert Chen's pen stopped mid-notation. He was judging the International Youth Science Fair, scanning project boards with the weary eye of a man who had seen 1,000 baking soda volcanoes disguised as original research. But this board, number 247, had an equation that made his breath catch. It was Einstein's field equation for general relativity, the foundation of modern cosmology, but someone had added a correction term. Not vandalized, refined. The modification was subtle, almost invisible unless you understood the mathematics at the highest level, but it resolved a paradox that had troubled physicists for decades. Dr. Chen looked at the name card beneath the display. Daniel James Reeves, age 15, Millbrook High School, rural Georgia. Behind the board stood a thin boy in an ill-fitting suit jacket, his tie knotted too tight, watching Dr. Chen with anxious eyes. The boy had chalk dust under his fingernails. Within 48 hours, Daniel's face would be on the cover of Scientific American. Within 2 weeks, 3 universities would offer him full scholarships. Within 6 weeks, his research would be declared fraudulent by a coalition of prominent physicists. Within 4 months, Daniel Reeves would withdraw from every academic program, delete every social media account, and disappear so completely that even his former teachers would struggle to remember his last name. What happened in that convention center didn't just challenge Einstein's equations. It threatened the entire structure of how scientific authority is granted and to whom, and the institutions built on that authority would do anything to protect it. May of 2008 was unusually hot in rural Georgia, the kind of heat that made asphalt shimmer and turned trailer homes into ovens. Sarah Reeves worked double shifts as a nurse at County General, her scrubs perpetually stained with coffee and antiseptic. She had one son, Daniel, born in 1993 to a marriage that ended when her husband died in a construction accident 3 years later. Insurance paid for the funeral and nothing else. Sarah raised Danny in a single wide trailer on the outskirts of Millbrook, population 3,200, where the biggest employer was a chicken processing plant, and the public library was open 3 days a week. Danny didn't fit Millbrook. While other boys played football and hunted deer, he sat in the library copying physics equations from textbooks into spiral notebooks. The librarian, Mrs. Patricia Howe, remembered him as unnervingly focused. He would sit for 6 hours straight, she told a journalist later, barely moving, just reading and writing. When I asked what he was working on, he said he was trying to understand why the universe was accelerating. He was 12 years old. Danny had no formal training beyond Georgia's underfunded public school system. His science teacher, Mr. Gerald Foster, taught from 30-year-old textbooks and spent most classes showing Bill Nye videos. But Danny had the internet, and he had obsession. According to testimony from his mother, Danny would stay awake until 3:00 a.m. reading papers on RZiv, the physics preprint server, teaching himself calculus and differential geometry from MIT OpenCourseWare videos. I'd come home from my shift and find him asleep at the kitchen table, Sarah said, surrounded by pages covered in symbols I couldn't understand. I asked him once why he cared so much about physics. He said because it's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else is random. Physics has rules. In January 2008, Danny entered the regional science fair with a project titled Reconsidering the Cosmological Constant in Accelerating Expansion Models. His poster board was hand-drawn, his bibliography printed from the library computer. He won first place. The judges, mostly local teachers, didn't understand his work but were impressed by its ambition. That victory qualified him for the state competition in March. He won again. In May, he traveled to Atlanta for the International Youth Science Fair, funded by a grant from the school district and $200 his mother borrowed from a payday lender. The International Youth Science Fair attracted 1,400 students from 60 countries. Most brought professionally printed displays and rehearsed presentations. Danny arrived with his handmade poster board in a cardboard tube and a suit jacket from Goodwill that was 2 sizes too large. He set up his display in Hall C on the morning of May 16th, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his stapler twice. That evening, Dr. Robert Chen began his rounds as a judge. Dr. Chen held a Ph.D. from Stanford and had spent 20 years studying cosmology. He approached Danny's board expecting another derivative student project. What he found made him forget every other display in the hall. Danny's work focused on dark energy, the mysterious force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate. Einstein's field equations, the mathematical foundation of general relativity, included a term called the cosmological constant to account for this. But there was a problem that every physicist knew about and no one had solved. When you calculated what the cosmological constant should be based on quantum field theory, the answer was wrong by a factor of 10 to the 120th power, the largest discrepancy in the history of science. Danny claimed he had found the error. Dr. Chen read the poster 3 times. The boy had introduced a correction factor that treated spacetime curvature as quantized at the Planck scale, allowing the cosmological constant to emerge naturally from the geometry itself rather than being imposed externally. It was elegant, startling, and if correct, revolutionary. The boy stood nervously beside his board. Dr. Chen turned to him. "Did you develop this yourself?" "Yes, sir. No university collaboration, no mentor. My mom helped me print the poster at work." Dr. Chen felt a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. "Can you explain your reasoning?" Danny's explanation was halting but coherent. He described how he'd been troubled by the constant problem for 2 years, how he'd started thinking about spacetime not as smooth but as granular, how the math followed from that assumption. When Dr. Chen asked about specific technical details, Danny answered each one correctly, sometimes pausing to sketch equations in the air with his finger. "This shouldn't be possible. You're 15 years old in rural Georgia. Where did you learn quantum field theory?" "YouTube mostly," Danny said, "and some textbooks from the library." Dr. Chen stared at him. "If what you've done here is valid, it's one of the most important theoretical advances in decades. I need to bring other judges." He returned 20 minutes later with 3 other physicists. They interrogated Danny for an hour. Every question he answered. Every challenge he met. By the end, all 4 judges were silent. Danny won the grand prize that night, $50,000 and a full scholarship to MIT. When his name was called, he walked to the stage in his oversized suit and accepted the trophy with shaking hands. In the audience, Sarah Reeves cried. A photographer captured the moment, Danny holding the trophy, his expression not joyful but relieved, as though he had finally proven he wasn't crazy. That photograph would be used against him 6 weeks later. News of Danny's discovery spread rapidly. Scientific American published a feature story titled "Teen Genius Challenges Einstein." Nature ran a profile. Dr. Chen submitted Danny's work to physical review letters for peer review. For 2 glorious weeks, Daniel Reeves was a sensation. MIT confirmed his full scholarship. Princeton and Caltech sent recruitment letters. A literary agent contacted Sarah about a book deal. Then the backlash began. It started with a blog post on May 30th by Dr. Marcus Webb, a theoretical physicist at Columbia University. Dr. Webb was 61 years old, the author of 4 books on relativity, and a man whose entire career rested on Einstein's equations being fundamentally correct. His blog post was titled, "The Danger of Celebrating Unvetted Claims." It questioned whether Danny's work had been properly reviewed, whether a 15-year-old without formal training could genuinely understand the mathematics involved, whether the media's eagerness to crown a boy genius had led them to overlook obvious flaws. The post went viral. Within days, 6 other prominent physicists had published similar criticisms. Dr. Alina Rostova from Berkeley wrote, "While we applaud young people's interest in science, we must not confuse enthusiasm with expertise. Einstein's equations have been tested for a century. The notion that a high school student could find an error is, frankly, absurd." Dr. James Hartwell from Oxford was more direct. "This boy's work is mathematically incoherent." The fact that it won a science fair is an indictment of our educational system's inability to distinguish real science from sophisticated-looking nonsense. On June 3rd, Dr. Chen received an email from the editor of Physical Review Letters. The peer reviewers had rejected Danny's paper. The reviews were scathing. One called it naive at best, delusional at worst. Another wrote, "The author demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how general relativity operates at quantum scales." Dr. Chen was stunned. He had reviewed the work himself. It was sound. He contacted Danny and Sarah. "I don't understand this," he told them over the phone. "The criticisms don't address your actual argument. They're dismissing you without engaging with the mathematics. Should we respond?" Sarah asked. Before Dr. Chen could answer, Sarah's phone beeped with another call. It was MIT admissions. They were calling to inform her that Danny's scholarship offer was being reconsidered pending a review of his science fair project's validity. On June 8th, a coalition of 22 physicists published an open letter in Physics Today stating that Daniel Reeves's supposed discovery was an unfortunate example of how public fascination with child prodigies can undermine serious scientific discourse. The letter called for stricter oversight of science fair competitions. The attention Danny had received shifted from celebration to interrogation. Journalists who had praised him now questioned whether he'd had secret help. A Reddit thread titled, "Did this kid actually do the math?" gained 10,000 comments, most of them speculating that a university professor had fed Danny the work to make himself look good. Dr. Chen became the target of that theory. By June 10th, his university department was receiving emails demanding an investigation into whether he had manipulated a child for professional gain. On June 12th, Sarah received a phone call from a lawyer representing something called the Institute for Scientific Integrity. The lawyer, whose name was Richard Corman, explained that the institute was a nonprofit dedicated to maintaining standards in scientific research. "We've become aware of your son's case," Corman said. "There are serious questions about the validity of his work and whether it was truly his own. We're prepared to offer assistance, but we need your cooperation." "What kind of assistance?" "We can provide expert review, media management, and legal protection. However, we would need your son to agree not to publish or discuss his findings until the review is complete." "For how long?" "As long as necessary to ensure the integrity of the process." Sarah's nurse instincts told her something was wrong. "Who funds your institute?" "That's proprietary, but I can assure you we're acting in your son's best interest." Sarah hung up. That evening, she Googled the Institute for Scientific Integrity. It had been founded in 2003. Its board of directors included 3 physicists who had signed the open letter against Danny, and its primary funding came from defense contractors who held patents on technologies based on relativistic physics. Sarah felt cold. These people weren't trying to help Danny. They were trying to silence him. On June 15th, Danny received an email directly from Dr. Marcus Webb. "Daniel, I've followed your case with interest. I believe you've been poorly served by the adults around you who encouraged you to make claims beyond your understanding. I'm offering you an opportunity to work with me this summer at Columbia. You would be mentored properly and learn how real physics is conducted. This could salvage your reputation and your future." Danny showed his mother the email. "What do you think?" Sarah read it twice. "I think he wants to control you. I think if you go there, your work becomes his." They decided to decline. Danny sent a polite response thanking Dr. Webb but explaining he needed to focus on finishing high school. Dr. Webb's reply came within an hour. "That's a mistake, Daniel. You're a child playing with forces you don't comprehend, and people much smarter than you are trying to protect you from yourself. If you refuse guidance, you'll face consequences." The consequences began immediately. On June 18th, the Science Fair organization received an anonymous complaint alleging that Danny had plagiarized his work. The complaint included side-by-side comparisons of Danny's equations and papers published by professional physicists, highlighting superficial similarities. The organization launched an investigation. Danny's grand prize was suspended pending the outcome. The $50,000 scholarship fund was frozen. MIT formally rescinded his admission offer, citing questions regarding the authenticity of submitted application materials. On June 22nd, a blogger who had praised Danny published a retraction after being contacted by Dr. Webb's colleagues. "I was wrong to endorse this work without proper vetting," the retraction read. "I apologize for contributing to the spread of misinformation." One by one, Danny's defenders went silent. Dr. Chen tried to fight back. He published a detailed defense of Danny's work on his own blog, explaining point by point why the criticisms were invalid. Within a week, Dr. Chen's department chair called him into a meeting. "Robert, you're making this personal. You're damaging your credibility and the university's reputation. The boy's work has been reviewed. It's been found wanting. You need to let this go." But the reviews didn't engage with the actual. The reviews were conducted by qualified physicists. "Are you suggesting a conspiracy?" Dr. Chen had no answer to that because saying yes would end his career. He stopped posting. By July, Danny had been effectively erased from physics. No university would admit him. No journal would review his work. When reporters asked about him, physicists referred to him as that discredited science fair kid. Sarah watched her son retreat into himself. He stopped eating regularly. He stopped sleeping. He sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at his notebooks, trying to find the flaw everyone said was there. One night, Sarah found him crying. "There's nothing wrong with my math," he said. "I checked it 100 times. I know there's nothing wrong." "Then why are they saying there is?" "Because they can't let me be right, Mom. If I'm right, then all their papers are wrong. All their grants, all their patents, all their reputations, everything they built on Einstein being perfect. It all falls apart if some kid from Georgia with a goodwill suit found the mistake." Sarah held him while he sobbed. On August 3rd, Danny deleted all his research files. He withdrew from every scholarship application, every summer program, every academic opportunity. When Sarah asked why, he said simply, "I can't fight them. They're too big." In September, Danny returned to Millbrook High School for his junior year. He dropped physics class. When teachers asked why, he said he'd lost interest. By senior year, he was taking classes at the community college, studying nursing. He graduated in 2011 and got a job at the same hospital where his mother worked. He never spoke about physics again. What happened to Danny after 2008 is a matter of public record, but what happened to his discovery is more complicated. In 2011, Dr. Marcus Webb published a paper in Physical Review Letters titled "Quantum Corrections to the Cosmological Constant via Planck Scale Geometry." The paper introduced a correction factor for Einstein's field equations nearly identical to Danny's approach. It was hailed as a breakthrough. Dr. Webb received the Dirac Medal in 2013. When a graduate student noticed the similarities to Danny's discredited science fair project and asked Dr. Webb about it during a Q&A session, Webb dismissed the comparison. That boy's work was mathematically unsound and based on misunderstandings. "My approach is rigorously derived. Any superficial similarity is coincidental." The graduate student didn't press further. No one did. Danny's case was not unique. In 1998, a 16-year-old girl named Lisa Chen from San Francisco developed a novel approach to quantum entanglement that challenged prevailing interpretations. After initial media attention, her work was systematically discredited by senior physicists. She never pursued physics professionally. 3 years later, one of her critics published a paper using her exact methodology. In 2003, a 14-year-old boy named Aaron Mills from Detroit proposed modifications to string theory that resolved contradictions in M theory. His work was rejected from every journal. In 2007, a Nobel laureate published strikingly similar modifications. He claimed never to have heard of Aaron Mills. In 2015, a 17-year-old girl named Priya Sharma from Mumbai identified an error in the Standard Model's treatment of neutrino oscillations. She was accused of fabricating data. Her family received legal threats. She's now a software engineer. Her correction was validated and published under a professor's name in 2018. These cases span continents and decades. They all share common elements. Young people, often from non-elite backgrounds, families without institutional power, discoveries that challenge established paradigms, all targeted by coordinated efforts to discredit and silence. This was not a series of coincidences. This was pattern, and patterns have causes. In 2019, a leaked email chain from a private academic mailing list revealed conversations among senior physicists discussing how to manage young researchers who made claims that could destabilize funding or contradict senior scholars' published work. One email, written in 2008, mentioned the Reeves situation and praised Dr. Webb for handling it effectively before it became a real problem. The emails showed explicit coordination. Why were these young people so dangerous? The answer lies in understanding how academic science actually functions. Modern physics is not a meritocracy of ideas. It's an economy built on reputation, grants, citations, and institutional prestige. Senior physicists spend decades building careers on specific theoretical frameworks. They write papers, secure patents, train graduate students, and establish themselves as authorities. Their economic survival and their professional identities depend on being right, or at least being perceived as right. When someone challenges the foundation of that framework, especially someone outside the credentialed system, they don't just threaten an idea, they threaten livelihoods. If Einstein's equations need correction, then decades of papers become obsolete. Grants based on those papers evaporate. Patents derived from those theories lose value. Textbooks need revision. Entire academic departments built on teaching the old framework become irrelevant. The institutional response is self-preservation. If that challenge comes from another credentialed academic, it can be managed through peer review, conferences, and professional discourse. But when it comes from a 15-year-old in rural Georgia, someone with no PhD, no institutional affiliation, no credentials at all, the threat multiplies. Because if Danny Reeves is right, it means credentials don't determine truth. It means the entire gatekeeping structure of modern academia, the PhDs, the peer review, the university prestige hierarchies, is exposed as a system for controlling access to legitimacy rather than discovering truth. That's why Danny had to be destroyed. Not because his math was wrong, but because his existence was intolerable. A system that allows a boy from a trailer park to overturn Einstein is a system that admits anyone could do it, that genius and truth are not distributed according to wealth or access to elite institutions. And if that's true, then what justifies the extraordinary cost of PhDs? What justifies the concentration of research funding at a few elite universities? What justifies paying senior professors six-figure salaries while adjuncts earn poverty wages? The answer is nothing justifies it, unless you can maintain the fiction that only the credentialed elite are capable of real discovery. Danny Reeves, and every young person like him, threatened to reveal that fiction. So they were systematically eliminated, not from life, but from the institutions that determine whose ideas matter. And the system celebrated itself for protecting scientific integrity. You might be thinking this was about physics, about academia, that it's not relevant to your life. Are you sure? In 2021, a study by the National Science Foundation found that over 40% of groundbreaking scientific papers published in the previous decade were initially rejected by peer review, with rejection rates highest for papers from non-elite institutions. The system is designed to reject outsiders. In 2023, an analysis of patent filings showed that independent inventors, those not affiliated with corporations or universities, had their patent applications rejected at twice the rate of institutional applicants, even when the applications were functionally identical. The system protects insiders. Right now, there are young people who could change the world if given a chance. There are brilliant minds trapped in underfunded schools, in rural towns, in families without connections to power. There are potential physicists and engineers and mathematicians who will never be discovered because the system is designed to prevent their discovery. They are the modern Dannies. In 2008, A 15-year-old boy from rural Georgia corrected Einstein's equations using textbooks from a small-town library and YouTube videos. The response from the most powerful institutions in science was to destroy him, to steal his work, to make sure no one would ever take him seriously again. And they succeeded. Daniel Reeves is 31 years old now. He works as a nurse in the same hospital where his mother worked. He saves lives every day. But the life he could have lived, the contributions he could have made, the discoveries that might have followed from his work, all of that was taken from him. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong credentials. Today, you didn't just watch a video. You witnessed a theft. Daniel Reeves was 15 years old when the most powerful physicists in the world decided his brilliance was too dangerous to acknowledge. They discredited him, silenced him, stole his discovery, and erased his name from the history of science. And they did it because his existence threatened their comfortable positions. You now know what they tried to bury. A boy from a trailer park who taught himself quantum field theory solved a problem that had stumped physicists for 50 years. And for that achievement, he was punished with erasure. If this makes you angry, if this makes you want to scream at the injustice, then turn that rage into action. Hit the like button because every like is a refusal to let Danny's story be forgotten. Every share is an act of rebellion against the systems that tried to bury him. Write in the comments, Danny deserved better. 3 words. Simple, but they matter. Because Danny's story was silenced once. We won't let it be silenced again. Subscribe to this channel because Danny is not the only one. There are other stories. Stories of young women whose medical discoveries were stolen by male professors. Stories of students whose inventions were patented by their universities without credit. Stories of children who were too brilliant, too questioning, too dangerous to the established order. I'm bringing those stories back, one at a time, and I can't do it alone. We cannot change what happened to Danny. We cannot give him back the career he should have had, but we can refuse to let him disappear. We can say his name. Daniel James Reeves, son of Sarah, 15 years old, brilliant, silenced, not forgot. They wanted you to never know this. Now you know. Now the power is in your hands. Share this story. Make people uncomfortable. Make them question what other discoveries have been stolen. And ask yourself, if you had been there in 2008, would you have fought for Danny? You can't answer that question about the past, but you can answer it about the present. Because there are Dannys right now, young people who need someone to fight for them. Will you stay silent or will you fight?